We begin with the highest level Western visit to Syria since the fall of the Assad regime last month. The German and French foreign ministers extended an olive branch to the new leaders in Damascus, expressing support for their transition. But they also made it clear that the EU will not finance Islamism or tolerate discrimination against women or ethnic and religious groups.
An outstretched hand and clear expectations. That's what the German foreign minister said she traveled to Syria with. But she didn't get the handshake when she met with Syria's de facto leader. Accompanied by her French counterpart, she urged the new leadership to govern for all Syrians, guarantee equal rights for all, including women and minority groups.
A better future for Syria means an inclusive, peaceful transfer of power, reconciliation and reconstruction. This requires a political dialogue involving all ethnic and religious groups, involving men and equally women. They all must be involved in the constitutional process and in a future Syrian government. In our talks today, we made clear Europe will support, but Europe would not be a financier of Islamist structures. We encouraged our interlocutors to draw on the UN's experience and support for this political inclusive process.
She also called for a break from the horrors of the Assad regime. Earlier in the day, the minister toured the cells and underground dungeons of the Sednaya prison, north of Damascus. This is where the ousted regime tortured and murdered thousands of opponents. The prison has become a symbol of atrocities committed during Assad's regime.
You simply can't imagine the horrors that happened in some places. But people have gone through hell here, near the Syrian capital Damascus. They were killed in ways that are unimaginable in a civilized world. That is why it is important that I was here today, together with the French foreign minister, and also on behalf of the European Union. Here to thank groups like the White Helmets, who made it clear for years that there could be no normalization with the Assad regime, which was built on barbarism and torture.
Baerbock said her visit signals the possibility of a new relationship between Syria and Europe.
Let's take a closer look now with Middle East expert Bente Scheller of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Bente Scheller, what do you make of this first visit? Do you think it achieved its goals?
I think that it was really important to go because also what the minister said, we should not miss this chance. We have to go and we can't leave the field to extremist powers who might be ready to fund whatever is happening in Damascus. Also, I think it is a very important gesture because Germany welcomed about 1 million Syrian refugees. And I think this opens a way for new relations with the future Syria. And therefore, I think it is good to start and banking on this and reaching out to see what is happening and trying to make the points clear that she mentioned: citizenship rights, inclusion, and a transformation that remains as peaceful as we have seen it so far.
We just heard Annalena Baerbock in the report demanding a dialogue involving all religious and ethnic groups and including men and women equally. How do you think that resonates with Syria's new leaders?
I think that would already mean a major change from what we saw under Assad, because minorities didn't have rights. Minorities were protected to a certain extent by the regime, but it was never anything they could claim. So I think it would really be opening a new page, and the same somehow for women's rights. Of course, we can't look into the heads of those who are now taking over. This is also just a caretaker government, an interim government until a new elected government comes in. But I think some of the appointments have really been interesting and encouraging. I had mentioned among those the head of the central bank, for example, being a woman clearly selected based on her qualification. We've also seen an appointment of a governor of the southern province of Sweden who is a woman and not just any woman. She is a leader in the civil protests that happened for many years in Syria and in the province of Sweda. So I think what we see is not just window dressing. There are some really relevant factors and relevant women and relevant positions being filled with people based on their qualification and to a certain degree inclusive.
You just mentioned this is a caretaker government. Why meet with these leaders now before any kind of election happens?
I think it is important to meet now. On the one hand, of course, you could ask, why meet Scheller? Because he does not have any office and there is a counterpart of the foreign ministers. There is already an appointed caretaker foreign minister. And I think this might really boost the impression of HTS that they will remain the leaders and they will remain in charge. However, I think if you don't reach out in this moment, your chances of really making clear what you would expect and what you'd hope for and how you'd support Syria, that would be lost. And so I think based on the experience that HTS is open to be influenced, that they listen and that they change some of the laws that they had in the making there, I think it is important to go there now.
And do you think that Germany is prepared to lift the sanctions that are still in place?
The sanctions are basically not a national thing, so that would require a consensus among the EU member states in the first place. However, we should not forget that there are also UN sanctions and US sanctions that are topping the EU sanctions. So I think that might be quite a large endeavor. However, I think it is worth looking into this issue rather swiftly to enable the new government and to enable a transition that will really also cater to the economic demands of the Syrian people.
Presumably, one reason the German foreign minister is hoping to establish contact is because Germany, as you mentioned earlier, is home to around 1 million Syrian refugees. What role does Germany want to play in Syria's future?
I think it would really be important to remember that among the million Syrians who came here, there are so many lawyers, engineers, and other professions that will be needed, but these have also not been sitting on their hands over the past years. They've been preparing for this moment. There are drafts of a new constitution that fulfills democratic and inclusive rights. There are drafts for how the transition should be done on a very administrative level. So I think to include all of them would be amazing, and I think both Germany should remember these people are here and they are ready and they should be able to be involved. Currently they are not, or many of them are not, because their status is not settled and they would need an exception from the German law. So even though they don't have the nationality yet, they should be able to travel now. I think this is a point for Germany to work on, but also HTS should be sure that there are so many works that have been carried out so far that will be helpful in establishing a future Syria.
Our thanks to Middle East specialist Bente Scheller. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.